The very first bill that was introduced in the U.S. Senate, Senate Bill 1 for the year 2019, was an anti-BDS bill. Now, BDS is boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, all right, against Israel. Okay, now go on the record again. I'm not part of a BDS campaign. I've never signed a BDS petition. I'm not part of any movement on it. What bothers me about this is that we have states throughout America that are passing legislation, the state legislatures, or you have governors who are signing executive orders, and now you have a U.S. Senate bill that has passed the Senate, something like 70-some votes in favor.
Yes.
To my knowledge, I think Kentucky Senator Rand Paul was the only Republican to vote against it. And this bill is now going to the House, but it's putting the U.S. federal government now on record. We would have a federal law that would punish Americans for supporting the BDS protest against Israel. Now, look, this is my position. Government should never pass any law that infringes freedom of speech. Lawful freedom of speech. Right? You can't yell fire in a theater. We all know that, okay? There are limits. But to express your political views or your religious views, whatever, there should be no restrictions on anybody. And my view is that if there are people who want to support the Palestinians by not buying Israeli hummus at their local grocery store, that's their business. If they want to protest by boycotting Israeli-made products and services to put pressure on Israel to negotiate with the Palestinians, that's the right of American people to do it. By the same standard, if LGBT people in America want to boycott Chick-fil-A, that's their right. They can do it. I would oppose anybody passing laws that would crack down on liberals and progressives, saying you can't boycott Chick-fil-A, you can't boycott, a corporation that has conservative Christian values. You can't boycott Hobby Lobby. I mean, this is un-American. We don't do these kind of things in this country. You don't outlaw freedom of speech. But we now have the U.S. Congress, the Senate has overwhelmingly passed Senate Bill 1, which is going to outlaw a boycott of Israel because of their treatment of the Palestinians. And this is a troubling pattern that we are seeing that the Israelis are pushing in the United States. We have all this hoopla in this country about Russian interference in the election of 2016. Because maybe some Russians spent a couple $1,000s on Facebook ads. I mean, seriously? That's Russian foreign influence. What about the massive amount of money that Israel spends influencing the U.S. Congress, influencing governorships and state legislatures across America, influencing the U.S. media? What about that foreign influence? We have now a country, Israel, that is actively working across America to get laws passed to punish American citizens who criticize Israel.
That's right.
Doc, this is frightening.
It's not just several states. I mean, it's
like 27, 30 states.
27, 13 have anti-BDS legislation pending. I mean, they're going for the whole table, trying to get all 50. It's what a trampling of our First Amendment rights.
It is. regardless of how you feel about the BDS movement. It's un-American to outlaw free speech.
And yet it's happening. It's happening right now.
Yes, it is. And for the record, the Jewish community in America is split on this issue. I would say it's hard for me to. The pressure is coming from Israel itself, not the American Jewish community.
Right.
The pressure is coming from Israel. Israel is bringing foreign lobbyists into this country, and they are working with Christian Zionist organizations such as John Hagee's Christians United for Israel to pressure congressmen and senators to vote for these anti-BDS laws, to get state legislatures to pass laws, to get governors to sign the laws or to sign executive orders. And I read the Israeli newspapers every day, and I'm reading about how grateful the Israeli government leaders are for John Hagee and Christians United for Israel and the Christian Zionists in America. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to show you something. Here's a video from Pastor Larry Huck. You may know him. He's been on TBN and Daystar and Christian television for many years. He has a church in Bedford, Texas. But here's a video from his church showing you how they were organizing. This is actually 2017 to get Governor Abbott and the state of Texas to adopt an anti-BDS law. So watch this video. This gives you an idea of what churches have been doing in America, the Christian Zionist churches, to lobby on behalf of Israel to crack down on Americans who criticize Israel.
Texas has just won a great victory for the nation of Israel and the Jewish people by becoming the 18th and most recent state to pass a bill against boycotting Israel. Key to this victory was the combined leadership of the Israel Allies Foundation, Pastor Larry and Tiz Huck, and other pro-Israel organizations who spearheaded support for bipartisan legislation to defeat anti-Semitism and discrimination against Israel spread by the BDS movement. Boycott, divestment, sanctions. Joe Sabag, representing the Israel Allies Foundation, who mobilizes global support for Israel, shared the importance of passing anti-BDS legislation across the country.
BDS refers to the tactics that are being employed to discriminate against Israelis and Jews and their trade partners and their supporters all around the world, in many countries and even in states here in the USA. BDS constitutes commercial discrimination against Israel on the basis of national origin.
Pastor Larry Huck, a longtime supporter of Israel and voice against anti-Semitism, hosted the key Standing with Israel event prior to the critical vote.
Doc, what do you think?
Well, it's not a surprising video. I saw it earlier today, and I've seen it repeated over and over again. Lots of churches here in North America have made similar claims and similar, promotions out there, making it sound like that there's this giant movement of oppression here in America to silence Jewish voices, which that's not the case at all. That's never been the case. This anti-BDS movement has more to do with the suppression of any kind of criticism of the way that Israel has been treating the Palestinians. And they've been very successful. They were successful in Texas. They're successful here in Florida, many states. And now we've seen, this bill in the U.S. Senate. But for them to convince the evangelical community to be on board with this, it really is. It's shivering, Rick, in so many ways.
Kerry?
Well, look at the bedfellows this is creating. It's the Jewish lobby against the ACLU, the people that voted against this BDS bill, Feinstein, Harris, Sanders, not exactly a bastion of conservative think. I mean, it's incredible that we're splitting it up like this. But not everybody is happy about I'm not so sure it's going to pass the House. I mean, what version are we going to see of this bill?
I just wish I'd see that much effort and that much promotion into issues of real import here in America. You get so many issues that, like Pastor Huck could be talking about, but that doesn't raise money. That doesn't.
Senate Bill number 1.
Yes, the first one of 2019.
It was to crush criticism of Israel. That's the first bill introduced in the U.S. Senate, and it was our senator here in Florida, Marco Rubio, who did it.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And we actually have a clip of Marco Rubio laying out the reasons for this BDS bill. I mean, putting them out there. Here's why we're doing it. So we've got that clip as well.
There is now a global effort, it's called Boycott, Divestment, and Sanction, BDS, that is designed to wage economic war on Israel. In essence, to pressure companies to boycott Israeli companies and people who do business in Israel until they stop, to pressure investment funds and banks to no longer do investments on anything related to Israel, and to pressure governments around the world to sanction Israel. That's what this effort is about. It is to undermine them economically as well, to destroy them. It's economic warfare. And it's being waged at every level, and it's working. People are adopting this around the world, and there are some that advocate for it here. We've recently seen in the news a number of companies that have decided not to do business in certain parts of Israel because of the pressure from that movement. And by the way, I would point out that they're not just boycotting the economy. There are people that they don't do concerts. They won't play the Israeli sports teams. They want the Israeli government kicked out of the International Committee for different sports, including soccer and the Olympic Committee. They boycott cultural events. They boycott universities. They're pressuring universities to cut ties with any university in Israel over all this. It is an effort to destroy Israel culturally, economically, in a way that works in combination with the effort to destroy it physically. This is an immediate threat. It is right before us, and it deserves our immediate reaction. And this could rapidly escalate. And I'm not going to take up another 30 minutes to describe all the scenarios in which that can happen, but I'll give you one which is not out of the realm of possible. Now that they know that the U.S. is going to be withdrawing from Syria, the Israelis decide, and I believe rightfully so, that for their own defense, they need to start attacking even more inside of Syria.
You hear that at the end, too, by the way?
Wow, what is Marco Rubio? What does attacking Syria have to do with BDS?
We can't criticize that either, right? Is that what he's saying?
Marco Rubio is owned by the Israelis. I'm sad to say that because I voted for that guy. But he is in their hip pocket. He knows that the BDS movement is not designed to destroy Israel. It is designed to pressure Israel to stop its harsh, brutal oppression of the Palestinian people, many of which are my Christian brothers and sisters, whom I met and talked to and with my own ears heard their own stories of how they suffer under the hands of the Israeli IDF. And I saw the walls. I saw the barbed wire. I saw the checkpoints. I went through the checkpoints. I saw the Israeli soldiers on the streets of the Palestinian towns. I see how they live. And the Palestinians simply want to live like human beings on the land that they've lived on for thousands of years. And the BDS campaign is to pressure Israel to stop its harsh treatment of Palestinian people. It's not meant to destroy Israel. And Marco Rubio knows it, and he knows better. But he also likes the idea that Israel and the United States supplied weapons to jihadists in Syria. Marco Rubio's got blood on his hands. He's got blood dripping on his hands because he's part of that covert military operation, that CIA operation, to run guns into Syria through Saudi Arabia and Israel. And I'm going to call him down on it because my Christian brothers and sisters in Syria died because of those guns. My fellow Christian brothers and sisters lost their families, they lost their churches, they lost their pastors because of the guns and rockets that Marco Rubio helped facilitate into Syria. He knows what's going on. He's part of the operation. Shame on you, Marco Rubio. I'm a Christian and I'm calling you down, Marco. Shame on you. Shame on you for doing the things that you're doing, which is ending up hurting innocent people. You know the corruption that's taking place in the U.S. government. You know about the corrupt, evil, wicked operation to supply guns and ammo and weapons to militant, bloody jihadists who've been fighting to destroy the Syrian government, because you're part of that operation. But going back to BDS, years ago, decades ago, South Africa, when it was controlled by whites.
Glad you brought that up.
It was a segregated apartheid country. You had two classes of people. You had white people who had rights, and you had black people who had no rights. But the white people were living on the black people's land. Let's be honest about it, okay? The Brits moved to Africa back in, 1800s? All right, there's a whole story you could talk about the settlement of South Africa. But the bottom line is, Great Britain colonized Africa, set up a white government in Africa. All right, so a few decades ago, the liberals in this country rightfully said it's time that the black Africans control their own nation, that they have the right to vote. They have the right like anybody else in the country. And so there was a boycott South Africa campaign.
That's right.
And everybody who is who's who in America, celebrities, politicians, corporate leaders, were part of the boycott South Africa campaign. And participation in it was proof that you care about human rights.
And can you even think of one person that was opposed to it?
No, not in the open.
No.
The U.S. government certainly didn't pass a federal law that made it a crime to support a boycott of South Africa.
Right. 27
state governments didn't pass laws criminalizing support of a boycott of South Africa. But Israel is meddling in American politics. And that man you saw in that church video, all right, he's not, most likely he is an Israeli propaganda agent sent into American churches to persuade American Christians to fall in line with Israeli agenda. And this is happening in thousands of churches. This is what John Hagee does. John Hagee doesn't preach the gospel of Jesus Christ anymore. He carries out Israeli propaganda operations in American churches.
It always worries me, Rick, when Republicans and Democrats, who are at their throats, each other's throats constantly, can agree on something.
Yes.
And I have another clip here. This is Senator Schumer, and it sounds like, with just an extension of what Senator Rubio was saying. Here's Senator Schumer, and he's talking about how the boycott movement against Israel is anti-Semitic. So let's watch this clip as well.
We must continue to stand firm against the profoundly biased campaign to delegitimize the state of Israel through boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. While Iran publicly executes its citizens, Turkey jails its journalists, scores of Arab nations punish homosexuality with imprisonment and torture, why does BDS single Israel out alone for condemnation? When there is such a double standard, when the world treats everybody one way and the Jew or the Jewish state another way, there's only one word for it: anti-Semitism. Let us call out the BDS movement for what it is. Let us delegitimize the delegitimizers. by letting the world know when there is a double standard, whether they know it or not. They are actively participating in an anti-Semitic movement.
I have a response to Senator Schumer. Okay. First of all, the Semitic people who are being oppressed are the Palestinians.
That's right.
They are Semitic people.
That's right.
The Palestinians are Semitic. Most of the Israeli citizens who are presently living there are not Semitic people.
Yeah.
They're Caucasians. Now, Elizabeth Warren has gotten herself in a lot of trouble for claiming to be an American Indian. And President Trump ridiculed her and called her Pocahontas, and she finally took a DNA test, and the DNA test revealed that there was only a speck, a teeny-weeny, minuscule, microscopic speck of Native American Indian DNA in her body. I would like to challenge Chuck Schumer to a DNA test and show us how much Semitic DNA is in his body.
Oh, that's the most racist thing you could say.
No, it's
Rick.
not. No, it is not. No, it is not. He claims to be a Semitic person. I question it. I think he's Caucasian. Now, race and religion are two different issues.
Right.
Are you born into religion or are you born into a race? All three of us were born white Caucasians. I can't change that. Okay, you can't change it. You can't change your race. You can change your religion. Okay? So I accept that Charles Schumer practices Judaism. But that does not mean he's a Jew by race. He claims to be Semitic. Well, I'm telling you, the Palestinians are Semitic.
Yes, and they are Semitic people.
They can prove they're Semitic, but I don't think Charles Schumer can prove that he's Semitic. And I don't think 99% of the people living on Palestinian land in Israel can prove that they're Semitic. Most of them migrated from Europe and came in and took the Palestinian land. Right. And they took it at gunpoint. That's the hard facts of modern-day Israel. The land was stolen from the Palestinian people at gunpoint.
By European Jews.
By European Jews.
Well, you talked about someone hurt by this. Somebody already has been hurt. A primary school teacher in Texas has been fired, Doc and Rick, for refusing to sign an anti-BDS oath embedded in her employment contract. Bahio Awai is a language specialist who works with autistic and speech-impaired primary children. Basically, she said, it's baffling that the school district can throw this down our throats and decide to protect another country's economy, talking about Israel, versus protecting our constitutional rights. I would not only be betraying Palestinians suffering under occupation, but I would be betraying the constitutional rights to free speech and to protest peacefully. She's from Pflugerville, Texas, which is a suburb of Austin, a very liberal area. But
she was fired.
Right.
Fired for refusing to sign a legal document saying, I will not support the BDS movement. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of anything like this in America?
Never. I mean, it's such a suppression of speech is beyond my comprehension. Why doesn't something like this upset you? The reason why is because we've been sold a bill of goods about Israel being God's promised land, and it's the eternal land. And we know if you read the Bible, it's not that, but that's for another day. Let's just focus on the free speech side of this, that you cannot criticize something. Is there going to come a day where you can't criticize whoever the president is, whether you're for him or against him? Is there going to be a law that's going to be signed someday that you can't criticize a member of Congress? I mean, if we can't criticize a nation that we don't agree with, whether you agree with our philosophy, our theology on this or not, you should agree with us that we should have the freedom of speech to be able to say whether we have a criticism or not, right?
Doc, the really outrageous thing is this is not about Americans being restricted in criticizing something in America.
That's right.
We're being restricted in criticizing another country.
Yes.
So, using what you're saying, I mean, what if France said you can't boycott French cheese, French wine, and we're going to make it illegal in America? You're going to lose your job if you boycott French wine.
We would think that's ridiculous, right?
That's right.
We would think that's just silly. You know, that's just crazy. But then again, we don't have dual citizens of France and the U.S. serving in the Senate, do we?
No, we don't. And
we do have a number, but we do have a number of dual citizens of Israel and the U.S. in the Senate. There was one lone voice in all of this, Rick, in the U.S. Senate that did say something regarding the BDS bill, and that was Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. He did come out and make a statement regarding all of this. It was a solid, logical statement. It made a lot of sense. We have that clip. Here's Senator Rand Paul talking about the anti-BDS legislation that was signed into law.
But even if you go farther back in our history, about the time of the Boston Tea Party and beyond, another boycott, you find that people were boycotting the slave trade. There were people boycotting buying sugar out of the Caribbean because they didn't want to have any of that money go to supporting the slave trade. I would argue that the right to boycott is about as fundamental a right as we have in America. It's a big part of the First Amendment. It's an important part of the First Amendment. But it is a fundamental aspect of freedom to be able to dissent, to protest. Even when everybody thinks you're wrong, that's what America's about, that you have the right to protest, that the government will not squelch your speech. How did we get to this point where flippantly today we are going to encourage states to have limitations on the First Amendment? I don't know how we got here.
Thank God for Senator Rand Paul.
Yes.
Well, he's right.
One of the few members of the U.S. Senate who has his head screwed on right.
Yeah, I mean, good commentary in Bloomberg. Yet the clear intention of the Senate bill, which they voted for, is to encourage and endorse state laws that very probably do violate the First Amendment. I mean, we're already past the point, right?
Well, once again, whether you agree with, where people stand on Israel or not, you should agree that it should be okay to raise your voice if you don't agree with something. But to outlaw it, this thing with here in Florida, where, the governor was pushing for legislation to basically kick Airbnb out of Florida.
Well, what he did, he set up a list. He's got a bad boy list. The governor has a bad boy list in Florida. And if you get on that list by criticizing Israel, you're in trouble in the state of Florida.
And Airbnb didn't directly criticize Israel. What they did is they delisted some listings in the West Bank, and that got some people in Israel upset. And that came back here, and now here's the governor of Florida. Why does he even care what's going on over there? I want him to be governor of Florida, not governor of Judah.
But I'm upset that the governor of Florida, a conservative Republican, is making his highest priority in his first month in office the defense of Israel.
And once again, the very first bill the Senate passes here in the U.S., number one, that we got to get that out of the way. But we can agree on this. Let's don't criticize Israel. We can agree on that, Republicans across the aisle to the Democrats. Let's agree on this. But killing babies, it's a matter of a difference of opinion, Rick.
That's right. Now, we were talking a little while ago about the school teacher in Pflugerville, Texas, and I'm assuming she was a Muslim. She appeared to be a Palestinian.
Well, she's a U.S. citizen.
Yes, but I mean,
in the U.S.
Is she Palestinian descent?
I'm not sure.
But she lost her job because she wouldn't sign a pledge. This is the teacher in Texas. But now I want to show you another teacher, a teacher in Kansas. It's Esther Kuntz. She worked at the Horace Mann Dual Language Magnet School in Wichita, Kansas. And her church, which was the Mennonite Church of America, Mennonite Church USA, the church, their national convention passed by 98% a resolution adopting a third way approach to the Israel-Palestine conflict, which means that the Mennonite Church was, as a Christian organization, a Christian church, was saying, we want to be on record encouraging a peaceful settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
And just to be clear, the Mennonite Church did not endorse the BDS movement per se, but they were saying that they did not like what was happening to the Palestinians there.
That's right.
So
the resolution was entitled Seeking Peace in Israel and Palestine. And the resolution limits the church's boycott to products and investments directly related to the military occupation of Palestinian territories. And the resolution called for dialogue with Israelis and Palestinians committed to nonviolence.
which is a very Mennonite approach to things. So
Absolutely. There she is. A Christian woman, school teacher, member of the Mennonite Church in Wichita, Kansas. And she was fired. Fired from her job as a teacher. This is what I'm trying to get across to you. The Israeli Zionists in America are causing Christians to lose their jobs.
yes.
This is what I'm trying to get across to you. Right? Muslims are losing their jobs. Others are losing their jobs because they're taking a stand in favor of the Palestinian people.
Right.
And I'm laying this at
not
the
even
door.
so much of in favor of the Palestinian people, just in favor of them not dying.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
She
when I say in favor of them, in favor of stopping the Israelis from shooting them in the back.
Yeah, she just wanted to solidify her interest in peace between Israel and Palestine. I mean,
We just had an incident a week or two ago. A group of Israeli soldiers savagely beat a Palestinian man. All right. They blindfolded the man and his son, his teenage son. They savagely beat the father. They made the son take his blindfold off and watch his father being beat by the Israeli soldiers. I think this happened in Hebron. Doc, what the Israeli soldiers get away with every day are war crimes. They're war crimes. Benjamin Netanyahu ought to be in jail. I'm serious. But he ought to be in jail for war crimes that his government is committing against the Palestinian people. I've seen too many shocking videos of Palestinians shot in the head, shot in the back. They blew up a man who had no arms and legs. He was in a wheelchair.
Yes.
And Israeli snipers shot him in the head. What threat does an armless, legless man in a wheelchair do to you? Because he was at a protest. Was he throwing a bomb? He didn't have any arms. Was he running towards them? He doesn't have any legs. He's simply sitting in his wheelchair at the border as Palestinians were protesting, and they shot him in the head. An Israeli sniper shot him in the head. This stuff goes on almost every week in Israel, in Palestine, and they get away with it. And I am praying for justice to be done on behalf of all the Palestinian people. And I pray that justice is done with Benjamin Netanyahu. I know he's the darling of the religious conservatives in America. Well, you're in for a wake-up call when they put handcuffs on him.